Have you ever wondered why some people always seem to attract chaos into their lives? As if they have a magnet that pulls in emotional vampires, manipulators, and toxic personalities, while others move through the same world, walk the same streets, and share the same spaces, yet remain untouched by such people. Have you ever looked around feeling tired, emotionally drained, and asked yourself, why does this always happen to me? Why do these people choose me? If you're watching this video, chances are you're exhausted from being emotionally used, manipulated, or caught up in the mind games of people who seem to feed off your energy. Maybe you're someone who tries to keep the peace, gives too. Much of yourself, avoids confrontation, yet still ends up in the same cycle of toxic relationships. And maybe, deep down, you've started believing the problem is you. But I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to share, because it could shift something deep within you. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, discovered something that most people never realize. It's not just about luck, fate, or misfortune. There's a subtle but powerful mechanism that determines who gets targeted by toxic individuals and who goes unnoticed. And no, it's not because those people are stronger, louder, or better at defending themselves. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What protects them is something far quieter and far more powerful. Toxic people are like emotional predators. They can sense unresolved emotional wounds. They are skilled at spotting hidden vulnerabilities, fears, and insecurities, often the very ones you try to keep out of sight. That's what draws them to you. That's what makes you visible. The key to becoming emotionally untouchable isn't about fighting back. It's not about yelling, cutting people off, or putting up walls. The real answer lies in something Carl Jung called integrating your shadow. So today, I want to speak directly to you, the one who's tired of feeling depleted, burdened by problems that aren't yours, always living in defense mode. I want you to know there is a way forward, but it's not what most advice out there tells you. It's not just about repeating affirmations, setting surface-level boundaries, or memorizing clever lines. What you need is something deeper. You need to truly face and embrace the hidden parts of yourself, the ones you may even be ashamed to acknowledge. That's where the real change begins. Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can help us understand ourselves. And it's this inner awareness that changes everything. Because the moment you stop projecting your hidden issues onto others, toxic people naturally stop targeting you. It's as if you become invisible, not because you're hiding, but because the emotional gaps they once used to enter no longer exist. So stay with me until the end of this video. Today, I'm going to show you how to master this principle, not just to keep toxic people away, but to finally feel free. Free to experience healthy relationships. Free to move through life without fear. Free to be yourself without carrying invisible chains. Because the real answer was never about fighting toxicity. The real secret lies in letting go of the need to be seen or validated by those who remain stuck in their own shadows. Ready? Let's go deeper into a space most people avoid. Carl Jung, in all his brilliance, dedicated much of his life to exploring the hidden forces that shape the human mind. One of his most important discoveries was this: unconscious patterns often formed in early life and shaped by unresolved emotional pain can show up as harmful behaviors in ourselves and others, even when they seem socially normal or subtle. This means toxic people don't appear by chance, and they don't pick their targets randomly. They have a sharp instinct for sensing what is wounded inside someone, because it mirrors what's hidden in their own inner world. Without needing to speak, they sense where you're vulnerable, where you carry shame, fear, or unmet emotional needs. If you often find yourself trapped in drama, manipulation, or relationships where you constantly have to prove yourself or protect your sanity, know this. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's happening because, unconsciously, you're sending out signals. Signals that say, there's something inside me that still hurts. Jung called this projection. Whatever you suppress or reject in yourself, whatever you refuse to face, becomes a kind of emotional energy that leaks out into the world. And toxic people are drawn to that energy like predators sensing blood. They are drawn to the wounded because that's where they can gain control, stir chaos, and feed off the emotional tension. But Jung uncovered something even more powerful. When you begin to embrace and integrate the parts of yourself you've kept in the dark, your shadow, you begin to develop what he called psychic integrity. Psychic integrity becomes almost like a protective field. It's a strong inner presence, a frequency that repels those who look for emotional gaps to exploit. Toxic people lose interest in those who don't react, who don't show fear, and who no longer seek approval or acceptance. People with psychic integrity aren't living in constant defense. They're not always bracing for conflict or preparing for betrayal. Instead, they move with calm confidence. They know who they are. They know what they stand for. And most importantly, they are clear about what they will no longer tolerate. This inner strength is sensed often unconsciously by those who thrive on chaos. It's as if emotional predators recognize these individuals as solid, unbreakable stones, offering no place for their claws to grip. Jung said the shadow is a living part of your personality. Ignoring it won't make it vanish, it simply turns into a weakness. But when you face it and accept it, it transforms into power. It starts working for you, building a kind of energy shield that naturally repels anyone looking to prey your hidden insecurities. Now you might be asking, how do I even begin? How do I integrate something I don't fully understand? That's where the real journey begins, because psychic integrity isn't something you gain from motivational quotes or a handful of self-help books. It requires deep, honest inner work. Yes, it's sometimes painful, but it's also incredibly freeing. In the next part of this video, I'll walk you through this exact process. Together, we'll learn how to recognize your own projections, how the things that irritate or even fascinate you about toxic people often reflect unhealed parts of yourself. Are you ready to take that first step? Then let's keep going. If this message resonates with you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring this content to more people like you. Thank you. Now, we're entering a space most people avoid, the inner world, because it's far easier to blame the outside. It's easier to point fingers and label others as narcissists, manipulators, or emotional vampires. And while those labels might be true, if that were the whole answer, simply cutting them off would solve everything and we'd be fine. But you've probably noticed that life doesn't work that way. You change your environment, get a new job, or move to a different city, and still, the same patterns repeat. You leave one toxic relationship and find yourself in another. You quit working for a controlling boss and end up with another just like them. You distance yourself from a manipulative friend, only to meet someone eerily similar later on. So why does this keep happening? Carl Jung gives us an honest but freeing answer. What triggers or attracts us most in others is often a reflection of what we suppress within ourselves. This is the core of projection. Projection happens when you unconsciously take parts of yourself, traits you don't want to admit, feelings you've buried, and place them onto someone else. That toxic person then becomes the symbol of everything you dislike or secretly desire, but can't bring yourself to confront. Think of someone who stirs strong emotions in you: anger, disgust, or even fascination. Now ask yourself, what exactly is it about this person that bothers or attracts you so much? Maybe you despise their selfishness, their need to control, or how they manipulate others. But if you look closely, you might notice that a part of you also longs to set firm boundaries. to claim your own power, to speak freely without needing approval. Perhaps that part of you was shut down long ago when, as a child, you were told that anger was wrong, that wanting attention was shameful, that speaking your truth was risky. So you buried those feelings. And now, whenever you meet someone who expresses those same traits without shame, you feel a strong emotional reaction: anger, disgust, or even intense attraction. Jung said the true transformation begins with the individual, and only then can the psychology of a society begin to change. What he meant was this: if you don't look within, if you don't identify your own open wounds, you will keep sending out emotional signals. Signals that say, there's pain here, there's fear here, there's uncertainty here. And toxic people pick up on those signals. They're drawn to the very places where you feel most exposed. Recognizing your projections isn't easy. It takes courage to admit that what makes you vulnerable is also connected to something within you. But this is exactly where your strength lives. When you ask yourself honestly, what is this person showing me about myself? You begin to reclaim your energy. You stop wasting your strength trying to fix others and start using that energy for self-understanding. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for the behavior of toxic people. Not at all. It means recognizing that while you can't control who crosses your path, you can control what kind of energy you give off. And when you stop projecting, emotional predators lose interest. There's nothing left for them to exploit, but there's another key step: learning how not to play their game. Ready to go even deeper? Let's continue. Now that you've started to recognize the projections within you, we need to talk about something just as important: trauma. Because facing your inner shadows is only the beginning. If you keep feeding the emotional games of toxic people, nothing will really change. And this might be one of the hardest truths to accept. Sometimes, without even knowing it, we provide exactly the energy that toxic people crave. They don't just need your attention. They need your emotional reactions. They feed on your fear, anger, insecurity, and resentment. Every emotional outburst, every attempt to prove them wrong, every desperate explanation or emotional breakdown, this is fuel for them. It's like a dance. They provoke, you respond. They toss out a small emotional trap, a harsh comment, sarcasm, a cold silence, or a subtle accusation, and then they wait. If you take the bait, if you react, they win, because at that point, the facts no longer matter. The attention shifts to your reaction. Suddenly, you look like the unstable one. You seem dramatic, overly emotional, or irrational. And then comes the guilt, the shame, the exhaustion, while they walk away untouched, often acting like the victim. How many times have you tried to explain something logically to someone who clearly had no intention of understanding? How many times have you laid out facts, made your case, hoping they'd finally see your side? And what happened? Either nothing changed or things got worse. You left the conversation feeling confused, questioning yourself, wondering if you really are overreacting. That's no accident. Toxic people are skilled at distorting your perception. They know that if they can push you off balance, if they can trigger an emotional reaction, they've already won half the battle. Jung teaches us something essential. What you resist persists. When you react with intensity, you're actually giving more strength to the very thing you wish would stop. You're essentially saying, this affects me deeply. And that alone becomes, this is the very tool toxic people use against you. They identify your emotional weak spots, study your triggers, and use that knowledge to trap you in a cycle that feels impossible to escape. So what's the antidote? Neutrality. But don't mistake neutrality for weakness or passivity. It doesn't mean staying silent while being mistreated or letting people walk all over you. True neutrality is a deep form of power. When you respond to provocation with calm, with thoughtful silence, or by simply choosing not to engage. You take all the energy out of the situation. You cut off the emotional supply toxic people rely on. They can't stand it when their tactics don't work, when they can't shake your emotional balance. Over time, they begin to avoid you, because your steady presence becomes a reminder that they hold no power over you. However, reaching this level of composure requires something vital: mastery over your emotional reactions. And that's not easy, especially if you carry old wounds that get triggered easily. That's why, beyond recognizing your projections and refusing to feed into drama, there's another key pillar in integrating the shadow: building strong internal boundaries. Boundaries aren't just external, they start within. Internal boundaries define what you will and won't allow emotionally. They protect you from emotional manipulation and subtle forms of control. And that's what we're going to explore in the next section. Many people think boundaries are simply about saying no to others. But here's a truth most people don't talk about. External boundaries mean nothing if you haven't built internal ones. Real protection from toxic people begins inside, because they don't just take your time, space, or energy, they get into your mind. And they're able to do that because they find open doors. What are those doors? Unresolved emotional needs. The need to be accepted, the need to please others, the need to prove you're right, the need to avoid conflict, the need to be seen as good or kind. As long as these needs are screaming within you, they become tools others can use to control you. Carl Jung helps us understand why this happens. He said the shadow is a living part of the personality, and until you integrate it, it will control you from the unconscious. And here's something many of us carry in our shadow: the belief that we must be loved by everyone, that we must always be seen as kind, fair, and good. But behind that belief is a deeper fear: the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone. And toxic people, like predators, can sense that fear. Just the hint of withdrawing affection, respect, or approval is enough to keep you entangled in there. Emotional games. Sometimes, toxic people don't even need to say anything directly. They just change their tone, avoid eye contact, go silent, or create an uncomfortable tension in the air. And without thinking, you start trying to fix the situation. You apologize, over-explain, and just like that, they've taken control again. Internal boundaries are what protect you in these moments. They mean knowing, deep down, that you don't need anyone's approval to exist. They give you clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will no longer tolerate. Most importantly, they give you the strength to let go of relationships, opportunities, or people's approval if staying true to yourself requires it. Now, this doesn't mean living with constant suspicion or closing yourself off from others. In fact, when you have strong internal boundaries, you live with more ease and confidence. You're no longer weighed down by the fear of being rejected or misunderstood. You trust that no matter what happens, you'll be okay with yourself. This kind of self-trust becomes visible to everyone, even to toxic people, who lose interest the moment they sense there's nothing left to manipulate. Internal boundaries also protect you from falling into emotional traps. When someone tries to provoke, guilt trip, or manipulate you, you can see it happening, but you don't feel the need to react. You stay centered, knowing that their moods or opinions don't define your worth. But here's the hard truth. Building internal boundaries takes courage. It means facing the parts of yourself that still feel insecure, needy, or desperate for validation. It means confronting your fear of loneliness, your fear of being judged, or the fear of being seen as selfish or unkind. Only those who are willing to face these fears can experience real emotional freedom. It's a gradual process. No one develops unshakable boundaries overnight. But every time you choose to honor your truth, Even when it costs you approval or connection, you strengthen those boundaries. And each time you do, your energy shifts. You begin to radiate psychic integrity, and toxic people immediately recognize it. They sense they can't control you and move on. But there's one more vital step in this: transformation. Perhaps the most powerful of all, because it's not enough to recognize your projections. Stop engaging in trauma, or build internal boundaries. You must also find the courage to face your own darkness. Because as long as you reject or deny your darker parts, someone out there will always find a way to use them against you. And that's what we'll explore in the next section. If what you're hearing here speaks to you, you'll find real depth in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's most important ideas. Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day journey to apply those insights in your life. You'll find both linked in the pinned comment. Now we enter the most challenging and, at the same time, the most liberating part of this entire path: accepting your own darkness. So far, we've talked about projections, emotional control, and inner boundaries. These are essential steps. But at the root of all the vulnerability that attracts toxic people lies one deep issue: our refusal to accept the darkest parts of ourselves. Carl Jung said, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." This is more than a quote. It's a truth with real power. Because everything you hide, everything you pretend doesn't exist, every part of you that feels shameful, unworthy, or too much becomes a tool that others can and will use against you. Let's be honest. We all have dark thoughts. We all feel envy, resentment, pride. We've all had urges to hurt, lie, manipulate, or get revenge. But most of us push these parts of ourselves deep down, convinced that if no one sees them, they don't really exist. But they do. And they remain alive, active, beneath the surface of your psyche, constantly searching for a way to express themselves. Here's the real problem. The more you hide your shadow, the stronger it becomes in the dark. And the more you hide it, the more exposed you become to those who can sense it. Toxic people have a sixth sense for detecting your fear. If you're someone who always tries to be perfect, always polite, always agreeable, they will instinctively press on the very wounds that remind you you're not perfect. And when that happens, you react, try to prove yourself, and once again fall into the same exhausting pattern. But integrating your shadow doesn't mean becoming harsh, selfish, or unkind. It means acknowledging that these sides of you exist, and choosing to deal with them consciously. It means realizing you can feel anger and not act on it. That you can have dark thoughts without letting them define who you are. When you admit that you could be cruel, you gain the power to choose compassion. When you acknowledge your envy, it stops eating away at you. When you recognize the part of you that desires control, you no longer fall for people who try to dominate you. This process isn't easy. It often hurts, because it requires you to let go of the masks you've built over the years, the masks you've worn to be loved, accepted, admired. It means facing urges and impulses you've judged as terrible. But Jung understood something essential. Real danger is not the shadow itself, it's ignoring it. Because what stays unconscious doesn't go away. It drives your life, and you start calling it destiny. When you finally integrate your shadow, something incredible happens. You feel lighter. Stop fearing others' judgment, because nothing they say can truly shake you. You already know your own darkness. And this gives you a kind of psychic freedom, presence that toxic people cannot stand. They feed on fear, shame, and the need to hide. But once they realize you've got nothing left to hide, they lose all interest. Carl Jung left us a powerful legacy. He realized something that even modern psychology is still catching up to. You cannot control toxic people. You cannot stop them from existing. But you can do something far more powerful. You can become the kind of person that toxic people instinctively avoid when you integrate your shadow, when you stop projecting your pain, when you build internal boundaries and stop feeding drama. You begin to give off a completely different energy. It's as if you become psychologically invisible to people who prey on weakness. You exist on a different level, one where there are no emotional cracks for them to enter. They can't provoke you. They can't manipulate you. And so they walk away. But the transformation doesn't stop there. Shadow integration isn't just about pushing away toxic people. It's about becoming truly free. Free to live authentically. Free to realize that you don't need anyone's approval to exist. Free to feel a peace inside you that doesn't depend on praise or criticism. You stop fearing your dark side, not because it disappeared, but because you've made peace with it. You understand it, and no longer let it control you. And as a result, something even more beautiful happens. You become magnetic to other, grounded, emotionally mature people. Your relationships shift. Your work environment feels different. Your energy becomes lighter. You no longer feel drained by social situations. You stop trying to wear masks or control how others see you. Instead, you attract people who value truth, mutual respect, and emotional depth. Jung said, "That which you resist persists." As long as you resist your own darkness, it will keep showing up. And it will keep pulling people into your life who force you to confront it. But the moment you choose to face and integrate it, your entire life starts to change. You let go of fear. You release guilt. And you begin to feel something rare and powerful. The feeling of being whole. If this video spoke to something inside you, if you found yourself thinking, "This is what I need," then I want to invite you to take one more step. Write in the comments what part impacted you the most. Whatever it is, put it into words, because that, too, is part of the healing. It's how the unconscious becomes conscious. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. Continue this journey. The next video is just as important as this one. See you there.